I always thought the hardest day of my life was losing my wife and daughter, until I got the call that changed everything again. What started as a dream ended in a nightmare I never saw coming. Hey folks, thanks for taking the time to hear my story. It's a real one, raw and personal. Ever since I was a kid, I had one dream: to wear the badge and serve as a police officer. That dream took root when I stumbled upon this faded black and white photo of my dad standing proudly beside my grandpa. It was the day my old man joined the force, and something about that image, it stuck with me. My name's Rick Cooper, short for Eric, but no one really calls me that. See, when I was born, my sister Katie was 2. She couldn't quite get the hang of the L sound, so instead of calling me Eric, it came out as Rick, and well, that just became me. I remember back in 4th grade, we were assigned this little writing project where we had to share what we wanted to be when we grew up. Most of the boys in class went for the usual: cowboys, astronauts, superheroes. Me, I said I wanted to be a cop. Simple and honest. Later that day, out on the playground, Stanley McCormick, the kind of kid who always had something to say, started giving me a hard time about it. He called my dad a pig, and then he called me a piglet. I tried to ignore it, but when he shoved me to the ground, I got back up and swung. Punched him right in the nose. He ran off crying to the teacher, holding his face. Next thing I knew, I was in the principal's office waiting for Mom to pick me up. She didn't say much when I told her what happened, just that Dad would have a word with me in the morning. And sure enough, over breakfast, Dad asked me to tell him everything. I told him the whole story, and he just looked at me calmly and said, "Rick, I appreciate you standing up for yourself. I've been called worse than a pig, trust me. I'm a grown man, I can handle it. You shouldn't have hit Stanley, but sometimes when someone lays hands on you first, you've got to stand your ground. Just be smart about it." Later that summer, I was hanging out at home just trying to figure out what to do with all the free time, when Dad came in from work with something up his sleeve. He said, "Rick, the city's rolling out a new police cadet program. I've got an application in my briefcase if you're interested. If they pick you, you'll get paid, wear the uniform, and if you stick with it, once you turn 21 you can head off to the academy. From there, it's a straight shot into the department." It felt like everything I'd been dreaming about was finally right in front of me. I told him, "That sounds like a heck of a deal." And I meant it. Fast forward to just a few months before my 22nd birthday, I had my own patrol car, my own radio call sign, Bravo 6. I was covering the North Beach sector. That stretch ran from Sunrise Boulevard all the way up to Lauderdale by the sea, bordered by the Atlantic on one side and the Intracoastal on the other. The area was a mix of small neighborhoods, mom-and-pop motels, shiny hotels, and local businesses. One night, during patrol, I came across a house with the screen door hanging open and the sliding glass kitchen door cracked wide. I could hear voices drifting out from inside. I drew my sidearm, keeping it low and close, and moved in slow. Every step I took felt heavy as I edged toward the sound, not knowing what I was walking into. I made my way around to the front of the house, trying to keep my steps steady even though my heart was starting to thud in my chest. I could hear Stan inside, doing his best to keep the suspect talking, trying to de-escalate. As I stepped into the living room, I positioned myself quietly behind the guy. I wasn't an expert in addiction or anything, but one look at him and I could tell, this man was strung out. Sweating, twitching, wide-eyed, it was written all over him. And I didn't think any amount of calm talk from Stan was going to bring this situation to a peaceful close. Before my supervising sergeant could even ask how things had played out, something unexpected happened. The girl from earlier reappeared, now wearing a clean t-shirt, and she quietly dropped down beside me. Without thinking, I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, offering whatever comfort I could in that moment. "You're safe now," I told her gently. "It's over. He can't hurt you anymore." She looked up at my sergeant, her eyes tired but determined. "He saved me," she said. "After that man shot the other officer, this one shot him. If he hadn't, I really think that guy would have done something terrible to me." Then, without another word, she leaned in, wrapped her arms around my neck, and hugged me tightly. She kissed me softly on the cheek and whispered, "Thank you," before resting her head on my shoulder. Later, my sergeant pulled me aside. "Rick, don't worry about anything. I's got nothing on you. Everything we've got says it was a clean shoot. And that bruise on your side? Wear it like a badge. You've got 10 days of leave, use it. Rest. You did good, son. Real good." After getting one last update from the doctor, I left the emergency room and headed upstairs to the floor where Stan was still in surgery. His wife, Kathy, yeah, he got married right after we graduated from the academy, was there, sitting in the waiting area surrounded by family. I didn't need to ask how she was doing, the worry in her eyes said it all. Anyone who claims they could walk away from something like that without losing sleep is either lying to themselves or just completely numb inside. That night, after I got home, I stood under the hot shower for what felt like forever. I shaved, got dressed, and walked down to the corner store to grab a coffee and a newspaper. I wasn't ready for what I'd see on the front page. The Sun-Sentinel had done a full write-up on the incident. The facts were mostly right, though there was some speculation about whether or not the shooting was justified. But that got cleared up real quick once the reporter spoke to the mother and daughter. Their statements confirmed everything that happened. Stan made it through surgery and was recovering better than anyone expected. When I visited him the next day, he even cracked a joke about the hospital food. Said he was feeling strong enough to go home the following day. We sat and talked for about an hour, mostly about anything but what happened. Sometimes that's the only way you can get through it. 10 days later, just like Captain Wilson said, Internal Affairs finished their investigation. The conclusion was clear: the shooting was justified. I was officially cleared and told I could return to duty. 6 months down the line, I had just switched from the midnight shift to daytime. My body was still catching up from the schedule change. The shift that day? Quiet. Too quiet, actually. Just one routine traffic stop and a backup call on a noise complaint. That was it. Then came a call that brought me back full circle. It was a family: grandmother Darlene, her daughter, and that same little girl I'd helped during the shooting. They lived in apartment 200 to 112. I paused for a moment before walking into my own apartment that night, thinking about them, and about how a single moment, one decision, can change everything. I looked down at the little dog by my side and smiled. "Well, buddy," I said, "looks like it's just you and me for a little while." The moment I finished my sentence, he reached up and gave me a big, wet lick right across the face. His way of sealing the deal, I guess. First things first, I had to get out of my soggy uniform and into something dry. While I was drying off the pup and unhooking his leash, I noticed a little tag dangling from his collar. It read Hans. "All right, Hans," I said, scratching behind his ears. "Let's go see what kind of trouble we can avoid together." A short while later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found an older couple standing there, kind, well-dressed, and clearly grateful. The woman extended her hand and introduced herself as Mary Sullivan. "My husband and I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "We owe you more than we can ever express for what you did this afternoon. You saved our granddaughter Susie's life. We can't thank you enough." "How is she doing?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "She's all right," Mrs. Sullivan replied. "The doctors want to keep her overnight just to be safe. Her mom, our daughter Darlene, is staying with her." Then she smiled and looked past me into the apartment. "Actually," she added, "we also came to pick up Hans. He was the first thing Susie asked about when we got to the hospital. She wanted to make sure he was okay." As I handed Hans over, Mary gave me a look full of something I hadn't felt in a while: true, honest gratitude. That moment stuck with me. Later that day, I drove over to check in on one of the residents in the neighborhood. As I pulled up outside her house, I immediately sensed something was off. Normally, she'd be waiting on the porch, always eager for a chat. But this time, she was peeking nervously through the curtains. When she saw me, she flung the door open and tugged me inside before I could even say a word. "There's something wrong," she whispered. "Across the street. That's Bill and Shirley Thompson's place. They're both at work, but I saw two young guys go in earlier. I don't know them. They don't live around here. That's their car there, the beat-up one by the curb." She pointed, and sure enough, it didn't look like it belonged. I gave her a reassuring nod. "I check it out." Truthfully, she probably had something new to gossip about for the next few weeks, but I figured it might be good to swing by and check on her now and then. Maybe just talk. Keep her calm. Back at the cruiser, I sat down and started logging everything into the computer, waiting on the tow truck to show up. All things considered, it had been a full, productive day. That afternoon, after finally changing into a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, I stretched out for a few minutes before hearing a little voice call from the hallway. "Please say you'll come," Susie asked sweetly, tugging at my hand. "Grandma's such a good cook. I know you'll love her food." I chuckled and glanced at Darlene, who smiled in a way that told me she wanted me to say yes too. "Well," I said, "how could I possibly turn down an invitation from two lovely ladies?" We settled on Saturday night. When the evening came, I drove Darlene's car, Susie giggling in the backseat with Hans nestled comfortably on her lap. Her parents lived in Rio Vista, one of those quiet upscale neighborhoods just east of Federal Highway, not far from where we lived. And let me tell you, Susie was right. Mary Sullivan didn't just cook. She created a feast. Later that night, as we stood by the door, Darlene looked at me with a little hesitation. There are things about my past you don't know, she said quietly. And if you want to ask, I'll answer. But if you'd rather not, that's okay too. I reached for her hand and gave her a soft smile. Look, I said, whatever it is, it's not a deal breaker for me. I just know I want to spend more time with you. After we got back to the apartment, I gently unbuckled Susie from her car seat while handing Hans, the now sleepy pup, over to Darlene. She cradled him in her arms like he was just another little one in the family. I'll take Hans for a quick walk while you get Susie tucked in, I told her. I'll be back in about 10 minutes. By the time I returned, the apartment was quiet, the lights dimmed. Hans trotted in ahead of me, tail wagging like crazy. As soon as he saw Susie curled up in bed, he hopped up beside her, nestled against her side, and let out a happy little sigh as he settled in. That pup was exactly where he belonged. Later that night, with Susie fast asleep, Darlene and I sat together on the couch. There was a kind of stillness in the room, the kind that made it feel safe to say hard things. She looked at me with a mix of calm and courage in her eyes. Before you there was someone, she said quietly. I thought he loved me, really loved me. He was the first man I'd ever trusted, the only one I'd ever been with. I listened closely, not interrupting. When I found out I was pregnant with Susie, I thought we'd share the moment, celebrate it. But the first thing he asked was if I was sure the baby was his. And when I said yes, he asked what I planned to do about it. I didn't need to ask what he meant. The pain on her face said it all. I told him there would be no abortion. I'm Catholic. I believe life is sacred. That baby, she didn't ask to be brought into this world, but once she was growing inside me, she deserved love, not shame. I reached for her hand. You didn't just do the right thing, I said. You raised a beautiful little girl, and you did it with strength. That night, after we got Susie to bed, I looked at Darlene across the table and I knew. That woman at the hospital was right. We did have something special, something real. So I reached across the table, heart pounding a bit faster than usual. Sweetheart, I said, I'd like to make this official. Will you marry me? 10 months later we stood at the altar. Darlene said yes, and not long after, Susie officially became my daughter in every way that mattered. For 3 years life was good. Really good. We built a home, we laughed often, and for once, it felt like the pieces had finally fallen into place. Then, everything changed. It was just a regular afternoon. I was getting ready for my shift, 3 to 11, and had just pulled on my uniform when Darlene walked into the bedroom. There was something off in her expression, something I didn't understand at the time. I asked her what was up, but she didn't really answer. Later, when I reported for duty, the desk sergeant stopped me. Captain Wilson wants to see you in his office. Right away. What's this about? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know. Just told me to let you know as soon as you came in. My heart started to thud. I didn't waste time, I took the stairs 2 at a time, trying to brace myself for something. When I walked into the captain's office, I found 3 people already there. Captain Wilson, my old friend Stan McCormick, and Father Riley. Stan had been working light duty with the detectives ever since he took a bullet a few years back. As soon as I stepped in and saw their faces, I knew this wasn't routine. Stan pulled out a chair for me and I sank into it. My voice barely a whisper, I asked if my parents had been contacted. Your dad's on the phone now, Stan said gently. He'll reach out to your sister and get things moving. I took the phone. Thanks, Pop, I murmured, voice thick with emotion. We sat there for a long time, Captain Wilson, Father Riley, Stan, all doing their best to offer comfort, though none of us really knew what to say. I stared at the floor, trying to gather the courage to ask the question no one wanted to answer. Have Darlene's parents been notified yet? I finally asked. Stan looked over at me, his voice steady but heavy. Not yet, Rick. Not yet. I need to do this, I said quietly, the weight of those words sinking into the air like a stone in still water. Father Riley, I added, looking over at him, would you come with me? Before he could answer, Stan put a hand on my shoulder. Rick, you're in no shape to drive. I'll take you both. We stepped out into the cool air of the parking lot and climbed into Stan's car, the silence between us carrying more than words could. When we got to my place, we arrived just moments before my parents and the rest of the family pulled up. And just like the night before, grief greeted us at the front door. Hugs turned into sobs. Words got lost somewhere between pain and disbelief. It was all too familiar too soon. Once things calmed down, we helped Mom and Dad get settled into the guest room. My sister Beth and her husband Pete took the other 2 bedrooms with their 2 little girls in tow. The house felt full, but not in the way it used to. That afternoon, Dad, John Sullivan, and I made our way to the funeral home. We had to go through the motions even though everything inside me felt numb. The funeral director was professional, kind even. He told us they would handle the transportation of Darlene and Susie's remains. I nodded through most of it, not fully processing. The next few days were a blur. The funeral mass at St. Anthony's was overflowing. Every pew was filled. People lined the walls, even stood outside just to be close. I saw faces I hadn't seen in years. Friends, fellow officers, neighbors, strangers who had heard the story. Father Riley led the service with grace. He spoke at the graveside too. I barely remember the words, but I remember the way he said them. Gentle. Steady. So many people came by to offer their condolences I lost count. It felt like every time I turned around someone else was hugging me saying they were sorry. And I knew they meant it. But the sorrow in their eyes only made the ache inside me sharper. A few days after the service, Mom, Mary Sullivan, Beth and Kathy, Stan's wife, helped me start packing up Darlene and Susie's things. That was one of the hardest days. Every drawer, every toy, every photograph was a memory waiting to cut deep. We tried to go through it slowly with care. But there's no easy way to fold up a life. At the station I threw myself into work. The surveillance footage from the night of the attack had been clearer than anything we'd had in the past. New tech, high-resolution cameras, audio recordings, facial recognition, helped us do what we couldn't before. The system automatically saved recordings to a hard drive and burned DVDs every couple of hours so nothing was missed. Thanks to that, the team was able to identify the suspect. His name was Leroy Washington. Career criminal. Long rap sheet. He'd served 7 years for armed robbery and had slipped through the cracks more times than I could count. "I'd like to see the video," I said one night at the precinct. Stan looked at me, his expression dark. "I've seen it, Rick. It's rough. It made me sick just watching it. But I had to. I needed to see it. I needed to understand." After that, I stopped going home most nights. I started staying late at the station, working with the night shift detectives, combing through every tip and lead that came in. Hundreds poured in, and each one carried the faint hope of justice. I only got a few hours of sleep each morning when I finally dragged myself home. Even when I started working midnight shifts, I stayed into the early afternoons trying to chase down something, anything. Weeks passed, then 10, and still nothing. It was like the earth had swallowed the man whole. He vanished. I was exhausted, worn down to my bones. And the worst part? I was beginning to feel like I was chasing a ghost, grasping at shadows while the rest of my life had already unraveled. When the family packed up to head back home, I stood on the curb and hugged them each goodbye. I could see the sadness in their eyes as they pulled away, but also the helplessness. They wanted to fix something that couldn't be fixed. And for the first time in a long time, I was alone. By the time I returned to full duty, I was in a much better place, physically and more importantly, emotionally. I felt like I could breathe again, like I wasn't walking around with a weight strapped to my chest every hour of the day. One of the first things I did was stop by Captain Wilson's office. I just wanted to say thanks, not just for what he did officially but for the quiet support, the moments that probably seemed small to him but meant the world to me. He didn't say much, just nodded and gave me a look that said, "Anytime, son." I still dropped in on the detective bureau now and then. Even though I wasn't officially working on the case anymore, I'd swing by and help sort through incoming leads. The good ones, those with even a sliver of potential, I passed on to the team. The rest, well, they ended up in the round file. You wouldn't believe some of them. One guy claimed he saw Leroy Washington board a flying saucer. Seriously. People can be creative, I'll say that. I was back to working a 3 to 11 shift. One night, after grabbing something cold from the fridge, I flopped onto the couch and watched ESPN for about an hour before heading to bed. Nothing unusual, just the hum of normalcy, and I was grateful for it. Until the phone rang. It jolted me out of a deep sleep. I fumbled to grab it off the nightstand and glanced at the clock. 3:30 a.m. "Rick," said the voice on the line. It was Stan. His tone was calm, but I could hear the edge underneath. "We found him. We're making the arrest in about an hour. You want in?" "Do I want in?" I said, already swinging my legs off the bed. "Stan, I'll meet you at the station in 20. An hour later, I stood at the door of a duplex apartment with Stan and a small team behind us. We moved in with precision. Inside, Leroy Washington looked more tired than dangerous, but I didn't let that fool me. He was done running. "You have the right to remain silent," the lead detective read, calm and firm. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Washington didn't say much. When asked if he understood his rights and wished to speak, he just muttered, "No." Stan and I took him back to the station ourselves. The rest of the team stayed behind to search the place. They found a few key things: the weapon, some burner phones, and a bag full of evidence tying him directly to the scene. It was more than enough. The trial held in Miami wasn't just strong, it was decisive. The prosecution laid everything out with clarity. The jury, 7 men, 5 women, took less than 4 hours to return with their verdict: guilty on all 5 counts. For the firearm charge alone, he was sentenced to 10 years. On the armed robbery count, another 20. Those ran concurrently. But then came the real weight, the penalty phase for the murders. Over 6 days they heard testimony, reviewed evidence, and weighed every piece of the horror this man left behind. When it was done, the sentence came down. Justice finally had a name. It had been nearly 11 months since I lost Darlene and Susie. And in that courtroom, for the first time in almost a year, I felt a sliver of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: peace. Outside the courtroom, the jury foreman came up to me. He shook my hand and leaned in, speaking quietly. "In case you were wondering why we took so long," he said, "we actually had our decision within 5 minutes. But we didn't want it overturned on appeal for a rushed verdict. That's why we sat on it. We didn't want to take any chances." I'll never forget that moment. The Coates family, close friends of Darlene's parents, were there too, offering quiet support in the hallway. It meant something having people there who remembered Susie, not just the case. Later that evening I went out to grab dinner. The restaurant was packed, and a hostess offered to seat me with someone else who was waiting on a table. Normally I would have passed, but that night something told me to say yes. She handed me a second menu, smiled, and said, "Right this way." And just like that, another chapter quietly began. I thanked the young woman for offering to share her table with me. She had this calm confidence about her, and she was, well, not just pretty. She was beautiful. Her hair was a deep chestnut brown, and her eyes were the kind of blue that holds your gaze a second longer than expected. There was something familiar about her, but I couldn't quite place it. "You probably don't remember me, do you?" she asked with a little smile. I admitted that I didn't, not right away anyway. She nodded, then leaned in slightly. "My name is Rebecca Dickerson. You saved my life over 8 years ago. You shot the man who tried to assault me. That night, you were the one who stepped in." Just like that, the memory hit me. That night, that call, that house. The fear on her face, the chaos. And now here she was, grown, composed, sitting across from me at a table neither of us had planned to share. Life has a strange way of circling back, doesn't it? We stayed in touch after that night. What started as a chance meeting grew into something quiet but meaningful. We talk every now and then, nothing serious at first, just checking in. Then it became more regular. Sunday evenings turned into little lifelines between the two of us. But one Sunday when she called, I could tell something was wrong the second she spoke. Her voice was hoarse, weak. "There's a nasty flu going around," she said. "I think I caught it." I asked if she'd seen a doctor. "No, not yet," she said, brushing it off like she always did. "Promise me you'll go tomorrow," I said. "Just to be safe." She agreed reluctantly. The next morning around 10 my phone rang. It was Bill, her husband. His voice cracked as he told me that Rebecca had gotten worse in the middle of the night. He rushed her to the ER, but it was already too late. She passed shortly after they arrived. That call gutted me. After everything we'd survived, she was gone, just like that. And all I could do was sit there in silence, holding my phone like it might still bring her back. Sometime after, I found myself visiting Rebecca's apartment to help Bill collect her things. She lived on the 3rd floor of an older building. As we walked up the stairwell, I asked why she didn't use the elevator. "It's safer this way," she once told me. "You never know who's going to be riding with you. I'd rather take the stairs." That building, it hadn't seen a maintenance crew in a while. Half the hallway lights were burned out, casting long shadows over the chipped floors and tired walls. As we reached her door, something in me paused. A quiet moment of respect, maybe, or hesitation. There had been another day not long before when things took a turn in a different way. Rebecca had been the victim of a break-in. When I got to her apartment that night, 2 suspects were already in cuffs. I followed them out and then went to find her. She was sitting on the couch, visibly shaken. The place was trashed. Drawers dumped onto the floor, her mother's jewelry box tossed near the front door along with her school-issued laptop and small flat-screen TV. Even her DVD player was stacked beside it like someone was cataloging her life before stealing it. She looked around the room, eyes wide, and suddenly collapsed onto the couch, tears spilling out as the shock overtook her. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat beside her, let her cry, and stayed there until she could breathe again. That night stuck with me. Sometime later I was back out on patrol, working another shift just like always. I radioed dispatch, 10 to 28 check, tag Alpha Charlie Hotel 3379. A young man had pulled off to the side the moment I lit him up with the blues. I parked slightly to the left of his vehicle to shield him from oncoming traffic, then stepped up to the driver's side window. He rolled it down and handed over his license. He was wearing a Marine uniform, sharp, squared away. Sometimes you forget how much life passes through a single window, one shift at a time. I pulled you over for going over the posted limit of 45 miles per hour, I told the driver as I leaned toward the open window. I clocked you doing over 60. He looked nervous but respectful, handing over his license with a quick apology. I'm sorry, officer, he said. I wasn't paying attention. It was just another routine stop, until everything changed. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. My head throbbed like someone was beating a drum from the inside out. I tried to shift, but pain shot down my leg like lightning. I blinked, trying to get my bearings, when I saw Stan sitting at my bedside. What happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Stan looked at me with a mix of relief and worry. A drunk driver, he said. Didn't obey the move-over law. Hit your cruiser while you were finishing up that traffic stop. I stared at him, confused. He continued, Rick, you're lucky, man. Real lucky. You were thrown up and over his car. If you'd gone under instead. I didn't need him to finish. You've got a fractured left ankle and a pretty nasty concussion, he added. The doc will fill you in on the rest. Just then Rebecca appeared at the door, her eyes red and rimmed with tears. When Stan called, I couldn't stop shaking, she said. I didn't know what my life would look like without you. Her words hit me harder than any injury. After I was discharged, I stayed with her during recovery. One night, as I sat on the couch, still sore but healing, Rebecca padded out from the bedroom, curled up next to me and stayed there. From then on, sharing a bed didn't feel like something new, it felt like coming home. That April, during her spring break from school, we planned a trip to Pensacola to visit my folks. They'd heard plenty about Rebecca, Mom especially, who had spent hours on the phone with her, but this would be the first time they met face to face. The drive was long but peaceful. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, the sun was starting to dip low. Mom was the first to open the door, her arms already outstretched. Watching them finally meet was like watching two halves of my world come together. That night we went out to dinner, just the two of us. We'd just been seated when I spotted John and Mary Sullivan across the room, the very people who once called me a hero for saving their granddaughter. I leaned toward Rebecca and whispered, That's them. The Sullivans. She didn't hesitate. Go invite them to join us, she said with a warm smile. When I brought them over, Rebecca stood up immediately. She hugged them both, genuinely like old friends. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing the news. Rebecca and I were getting married. Their congratulations came quick and heartfelt. They wanted to hear every last detail about our plans. A few weeks later, I got word that Leroy Washington had been killed in prison. Apparently he had picked the wrong fight and paid for it. When Stan told me, I just nodded. It didn't bring me any peace, not really, but it did close a chapter one never wanted to live through in the first place. When I shared the news with Rebecca, she wrapped her arms around me and said, I hope he rots in hell. Nothing more. Nothing less. Exactly 1 year later, I got home around 3:15 a.m. after a long shift. A tanker truck had overturned near Port Everglades, and traffic had been a mess all evening. I was exhausted, ready to crash. Rebecca met me at the door, her face glowing but serious. I won't be drinking for a while, she said, handing me a glass of water instead of my usual scotch. Because, you're going to be a dad. I froze. She pulled a small white stick from her pocket. 2 pink lines. I took a home test this morning, she said softly. I'm making an appointment to confirm tomorrow. A week later, the doctor confirmed what we were already starting to believe. We were having a baby. I was over the moon. We didn't tell anyone at first. Wanted to wait until we passed those early months just in case. But by the time her belly started to show, we were too excited to hold it in anymore. Then, 3 months later, I came home from work and found Rebecca waiting with a look I hadn't seen before. She handed me a double scotch on the rocks. You might want to sit down, she said. I sat and braced myself.